what we've done is we've used these tactics on numerous occasions. We tend to fight misinformation using some of our leading privacy and security influencers, myself included. I've been profiled as the top global influencer for privacy and digital ethics in the world, and I have more broadcast airtime than any other technologist in the UK, and therefore I've been able to act effectively as a voice to counter misinformation on behalf of many clients. We also have colleagues and a wider community of influencers that we can call upon. Des is a close colleague of mine who has a podcast with over 1.4 million subscribers and a massive audience, and we have used this in the past, and we've teamed up to counter social hysteria. And on a far wider basis, there is a very large team that we call the Fudbusters, who can be there employed by you to engage on a far longer term program of messaging to counter fear, uncertainty and doubt. And this can be enormously effective. Take, for example, the Huawei incident with the actions that were taken by the US government to try and prevent any other country acquiring Huawei kit for their 5G rollouts. This came to a head in the UK. I felt that it is a lot of hysteria being drummed up by the US. I think all equipment manufacturers have faults with their systems. All of them need to continually patch and improve their security. I don't think that Huawei was any more vulnerable or was actually justifiably singled out in this particular incident, because I think all its competitors were equally liable to the sort of weaknesses that were pointed at in terms of Huawei. And therefore, I worked with Huawei, and obviously this is a company with very deep pockets who were working in an area where this was a massively important issue to them, and they could employ any influencer worldwide to do this, but they chose a small group, myself included, and we acted on their behalf to actually address some of the fear, uncertainty and doubt, the hysteria and the misinformation out there that was coming from the US administration. I acted before the incident, and I was on television and social media talking about their 5G technology ahead of the main decision. Again, I appeared on international broadcast TV at the time of the decision, again giving context and providing an expert, trusted voice to actually counter some of the misinformation. And again afterwards, there was a lot of follow-up and further TV appearances where I appear regularly, as much as once a week, as a commentator on the topical issues, and this was particularly topical at the time. I also helped Huawei with an issues-focused campaign on trust in tech, where we did various materials, including a video that had something like 490,000 views in its first week. So this was an enormously effective campaign in support of Huawei, countering the sort of hysteria and misinformation that no company wants to be on the receiving end of. I've given you some examples there of some of the approach that we would recommend and the reasons why we're working with some of the big companies in the world and how we've done that. I just want to focus a little bit on the way in which we think it's best to engage with organizations. First of all, looking at in-house teams. Obviously, in-house teams need to include everybody who has some sort of stakeholder relationship in the crisis management plan, from IT to legal to comms and marketing, and indeed the executive team. We work with organizations, we help them prepare in advance, because obviously you're not GDPR compliant unless you're regularly testing your processes and assessing and evaluating them, and therefore we'll do scenario planning and run immersive simulation exercises to help them be well prepared and crisis ready. We also ensure that we have the very best incident response cover for organizations that are looking for that, and they're simply not going to get this typically from cyber insurance policies that may not pay out, and even if they do, aren't necessarily going to offer you the heart surgeon you're looking for, and you may only get a general practitioner or a family doctor. So you're going to want to have some sort of incident response cover either included in that policy that makes you able to call in the real experts, or you're going to have a separate cyber incidents response cover that's going to provide you with that cover to help you when things do go wrong. Obviously, having access to the best specialists is essential here. These aren't the type of skills that you typically have in-house, and we're ready and willing and able whenever this occurs. In terms of agencies, obviously agencies want to protect their clients, and the same services and all the same things that are true for their clients are also true for agencies, except that we're happy to partner with agencies. The agencies themselves wouldn't have the specialist legal and technical and influencer skills and capabilities that we have, and therefore we allow agencies to resell and white label our services in order to provide some extra support to their clients when they need it most. Obviously, on top of this, there is ourselves, and we work well with both the agency and in-house teams. But it's important to note that Equifax, Marriott, and all the other firms that have been hit very hard, they all had in-house teams. They all had agency teams, but none of the teams working for them were the sort of cyber specialists that we are, and therefore they took actions early in the incident, which made things worse, and they lived to suffer the consequences. So we would just again advocate, you need to get real protection here from the experts. And we have a global reach across all of the different services that we offer, from our rapid response service, our cyber law service, reputation management and social. So we're happy to work with anybody out there. And we've got a sort of at-a-glance guide here on what you need to think about when you have an incident. It's got my contact details, so do get in touch if anything like this happens. But we'd far prefer you to get in touch long before anything goes wrong, because being prepared, being truly crisis prepared for the cyber threat that is coming, that is looming on the horizon, is absolutely essential. Anyway, thank you very much for your time. I think there's possibly room for a few questions here. You can contact me using the contact details I've provided, or maybe we can have a few questions here from Philippe. Over to you, Philippe.
Bill, thank you very much for your keynote just now. An important topic, because we both know, and I think that's simply because we are a bit specialized in crisis comms, that cyber incidents are on top of the list. Has that changed over the years, or is it just an awareness that came with companies?
I think the interconnectedness and therefore the vulnerability that we have as a society is growing all of the time. We've never been as interconnected as we are. We've never been as reliant on technology, and we've never been as reliable. And actually, that has multiplied manyfold with the lockdown and the current pandemic situation. Many companies try and restrict the number of access points and points of vulnerability that they have. But the moment they suddenly start to work from home, they're suddenly getting people to use their own devices, because they haven't all been issued with specially secure laptops or special connections that have encryption or anything like that. People have had to start working from home in a bit of a hurry, and many companies and many organizations, many individuals were totally unprepared for this. And therefore, they haven't taken all the usual security precautions that you would normally take. And therefore, the threat landscape has suddenly multiplied. And not only are we facing a far greater threat, we're facing some really very opportunistic individuals who are exploiting this situation. The number of phishing attacks related to the pandemic, the number of attacks even on health establishments, which is sickening. This has gone up by an enormous amount.
Now, Bill, we've both worked for a technology company as colleagues where mobile working or distance working, whatever you call it, was ingrained. There was not even a discussion, at least not where I was, and I don't think in the UK it was a big discussion either. And at the same time, it was a technology company, so it was secured. I can imagine that in other more traditional organizations, large or small, with this change coming up, first of all, suddenly, and secondly, I can imagine, if you're not in the technology sector, that as a communicator, maybe you're not so much in tune with your IT department. So I can imagine that there's a big cleavage here, and that not everyone is on the same agenda about this topic.
Okay, so there are a couple of issues here. First of all, we need to look at technology companies separately. Technology companies, first of all, should be a lot more familiar with the risks. They should actually also be better set up for home working. There have been a few that have bucked the trend, and my former employee, IBM, actually instructed people to stop working from home and tried to get more people to work from the office. Many saw this as an attempt by the company to try and change its profile of workers, because younger people would be more willing to go into the office. But this has led to a situation now during the pandemic where they've had to suddenly reverse this. Thankfully, most technology companies are far more open to the sort of home working that we're experiencing at the moment, and many of them are far better set up. But technology companies are also significant targets in this environment because they hold a lot of data, and they're the type of people that the opportunist hackers are going to go after.
Yeah.
But also, you need to look at non-technology companies. Many people think that cyber is a threat that the technology companies mainly need to think about, when in reality, we are all holding data. We're all subject to GDPR, and we're all at threat from the type of hacking and the type of cybercrime that we're seeing. And therefore, we all need to be prepared, and we all need to be able to respond rapidly if an incident occurs, and in the correct manner. And I've identified in my keynote how the approach to a cybercrime is so very different than the approach that you would take to almost any other type of crisis.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that is so important in your keynote is to explain, and I hope everybody got that clearly and written down somewhere, when you're under that kind of attack, the other person is not the bad one, you are, and that changes the whole paradigm of how we approach traditional, let's say, traditional crises, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, most crisis communications is built on the premise that you've been the victim of a crime and serve your customers. And therefore, if you show empathy with your customers, you're going to gain sympathy. And it's all about putting out an executive front and center, taking responsibility, showing empathy for your customers. And absolutely, you expect to gain sympathy from everyone involved. Cybercrime is almost alone in being the only crime where the victim, that's you, gets the blame, because it is a real strange anomaly that for cybercrime, they don't blame the hackers. They blame the company that's been hacked. You're the victim of a crime, and yet you're being vilified. You're being blamed. And therefore, if you wheel out a spokesperson in the normal way that you would for any other type of crisis, that spokesperson is going to totally be shot down and taken to the cleaners. You need to be prepared for the fact that it is a very different type of crime, that it quite often you're the last people to find out about it, because systems have gone down. There's been some late data has appeared elsewhere, and you're on the back foot right from the word go. And also, the crime could have happened something like 6 months or more before it's actually discovered. Typically, the time it takes to discover cyber incidents is over 200 days. And therefore, that puts you completely on the back foot. You've got an enormous amount of exploration to do to find out the extent of the problem, the exact scope, what has happened, when it happened, and throughout all of this, you're getting the blame, and therefore you need a totally different approach.
And then, as well, if we just look a bit broader, first of all, so it's totally different communicating around that type of crisis than any other. But you've also identified that all the other things around that are not really, let's say, well established, or rather new. We've spoken about this. Insurance, people think they're insured most of the time, not really as they should. I mean, there's so many different aspects to that. It's a complex crisis when it happens.
Certainly, but one of the things that I highlighted in my talk, and I can certainly go into more detail with people if they'd like to get in touch, is you really shouldn't rely on cyber insurance. There are so many opt-outs, there are so many provisions within policies that it is almost impossible for you to bring a claim on almost any incident without there being some way of the insurance company being able to wriggle out of it. And we've seen this on a number of different claims that haven't been settled recently. A lot of the NotPetya attacks a couple of years ago, the insurance company simply refused to pay out. The attack had come from, they thought it had come from North Korea, and therefore it was an act of war. And they used that provision to refuse to pay out on a number of policies. And if we see a very large cyber attack where there have been a lot of impacted clients, the insurers don't want to face that level of liability, and they are going to be looking for every way of getting out. And if you are familiar with the way that most cyber insurance policies are written, there is absolutely the chance that they will get out of every claim. And therefore, it simply isn't something you can rely on. And even if it does pay out, you've got to be a little bit concerned about what it's going to pay for. We saw with Norsk Hydro that had a ransomware attack where it incurred costs of something like 70 million euros. And the payout, it had full cyber insurance, the payout was 3.6 million euros, about 6% of the overall costs. And this is a bit like if you have somebody crossing the road and they're hit by a car and knocked down. This is a bit like the insurance company turning up and saying, oh, don't worry, you've got cover, and turning up with a stretcher and stretchering you to the side of the road and leaving you there and saying, well, you're no longer in harm's way. You'd actually kind of expect a little bit more than that. You'd probably expect an ambulance to be provided to take you to hospital, maybe a doctor to look you over to check that you were okay, and hopefully the best surgeons available if you needed urgent treatment. And what we've done is we've assembled the very best technical people, some people who've led major incidents for Western governments on some of the attacks that they've had, and some of the responses they've needed to take. We've got the top cyber lawyers in the world, and a team that are spread geographically in many different regions. We've got a top-notch crisis response, a reputation management team, but also one of the other areas that we cover is around the sort of misinformation and the hysteria that you get on social media with these type of incidents. And typically that's something that's very difficult to deal with. And we have, I mean, personally, I've been profiled as the top opinion leader globally for privacy and digital ethics, and it's something that I'm passionate about. And I've helped bring cases against some of the largest tech firms in the world when they've transgressed. I've also defending companies when they've been the victims of crime. And on top of that, I'm an advisor to people bringing litigation or investing in this sort of area. And therefore, I'm very high profile. I've got a number of other people that I can work with as a team of influencers. But we have the credibility, having, on some instances, held companies to account for their lack of digital ethics. That when a company is the victim of the crime, and we spoke earlier about the fact that we're talking about victims here, but they're not being treated that way, that you can have an independent voice, a key opinion leader, somebody who is a renowned and an authoritative opinion leader globally, who can speak out on your time, on your behalf, at a time when your credibility is at its lowest ebb. You're not going to be able to counter a lot of this hysteria and misinformation. And you need that sort of support in this type of crisis to stem the misinformation and also to counter the hysteria.
Because that's very typical about these crises as well. I mean, it is a very specific area of knowledge, of experience. And what I've seen, and we've spoken about this before, is that you get suddenly everyone is becoming, it's a bit like the pandemic. I mean, everybody suddenly is a specialist in epidemiology and knows how to handle this. And we see that exactly the same thing happening with cyber crimes, where you have people maybe have a strong voice, but they are not experts on that topic. So that aspect of bringing in influencers who know what it's about to counter all these rumors and misinformation, and sometimes misinformation with an agenda, right? That is a crucial aspect of a communications defense, right?
Yeah, if you look at people like Marriott, people like Equifax, all of the companies that have brands which have been tarnished by this type of incident, all of them had significant in-house teams of IT specialists, of comms specialists, of in-house lawyers. They were armed to the hilt internally. They also had PR companies as advisors. They had external law firms. They had IT contractors supporting them. They had everything that you would normally assume that would be the type of people that you would turn to in this sort of instance. But they didn't have specialist cyber support, and therefore they didn't know exactly how to respond, and they didn't have the authority and the credibility to counter the sort of hysteria that occurred, and therefore they were all shot down in flames. And what people don't realize is that, again, going back to the ambulance analogy here, when it does happen, you don't want to be stretchered to the side of the road, and you don't want to just turn up and go see your family doctor. Your family doctor may be fine for all sorts of other ailments, but when it's something really serious, you need the best specialist surgeons in the world. And if it's heart surgery, then you want a heart surgeon. You just don't want a general a family doctor. And the analogy here is the fact that everyone assumes that having your normal resources, both in-house and agency, are going to help you in this respect. We have a specialist team that are the best in every particular aspect, from the technical to the legal to the reputational to the social. And we've deliberately assembled a world-leading team. And we make that team available not only directly to clients, but also to agencies. And if agencies want to white label or resell our services, they're welcome to. And they can do this on a modular basis. So if they just want the technical and the legal and the social, and they want to do the reputational piece themselves, fine. Or they can just have a bit of reputational support, depending on what they want to do. But typically, you not only need the specialist knowledge, but you also need to be able to rapidly increase your capability and the size of your team to respond in this way. And if you're going to be getting extra resources on board, you might as well have the specialists who are really going to have a direct impact, are going to help you and are going to get you out of problem.
Because it's a combination of all these aspects. It's not just about communications. It's also about all these other aspects that are in there, the legal aspect, the social, the influencer aspect. So it's that combination of skills, specialized skills that you then need.
And they all build from each other. If you look at the way that these different aspects work, the technical team needs to go in first to fix the problem and make sure that it's not getting worse. But they also need to do the sort of digital forensics to find out what the problem was and what the full scope was. The legal team then takes this forensics in order to put together a legally defensible narrative. And it's that narrative that is going to define the response that you have. Because with GDPR, you not only have the prospect of potentially massive fines, but the regulators can actually take away your right to process data. And that would bring your business to a grinding halt. So the sanctions here are incredible. And therefore, you need to make sure that you have a really focused, legally defensible narrative that you know is going to be robust. You then take that legally defensible narrative, and then the reputation management team needs to use that as the basis for the brand defense. And then you have the social media team who are hopefully have within them the sort of authoritative influencers that are going to be able to counter the hysteria and the misinformation. And you use these trusted voices, the sort of voices that you're going to be desperate to have speaking out on your behalf in this sort of situation, in order to be able to have a voice in the market and to actually prevent the hysteria taking off. Because once it has done, your brand, your name, your reputation has been tarnished potentially for a very, very long time. Yeah.
Bill, to close the Q&A, people have been watching this. I'm sure that for many of them, there will be a light bulb going on, like, I need to look into this tomorrow. What is the very first step they should do? What is the top advice here? Tomorrow, I'm going into the office. I'm having this topic on my agenda. I need to discuss this within the organization I work for. I'm responsible for communications, reputation. What is the top tip you can give them?
I think you need to have a conversation with your management team, because we all saw that there was a massive credit problem when the financial crisis occurred. We're all aware of the health risks that have caused the pandemic. Most companies were too slow to react. They weren't prepared for this sort of thing. We all can see the very obvious threat that there is from cybercrime. We need to take that risk seriously early. And actually, you need to have a conversation with your senior management that they have under GDPR an obligation to test and assess regularly their processes. And the best way to do this is with sort of immersive simulation exercises that can keep people on their toes, and then to have on your Rolodex people such as ourselves who are specialists to be able to call on. But when normally you have a discussion with your senior management about crisis communications, they're going to say, well, there's not much of a threat here, and we've got no real obligation to do it. The difference here with cyber is there is a very obvious threat. And if you want to conform to your GDPR obligations, you do have an obligation to do this sort of thing and to take it seriously. And therefore, don't put it off. Have that discussion. Make your management aware that they are under GDPR. They have an obligation to test and assess these things and to be prepared. And that they need the kind of specialist support because their cyber insurance isn't going to give it to them.
Yeah. Bill, thank you very much. It was great having you on the Virtual PR Summit. You have a great background, so I know the time and the effort it took to be online now. But thanks again for your
The ridiculous thing is, at the moment during lockdown, I'm living on a castle in an island in a lake, which is the most picturesque background that you could imagine. Unfortunately, it's in the middle of nowhere and the connectivity is terrible. So I've had to stand in front of a big brick wall where I can get some Wi-Fi. But anything for your audience and anything for the people out there, tell them they're free to reach out to me. I'd love to hear from them. But I hope they enjoy all the lectures because you've assembled a really great crowd of experts in all sorts of different areas.
Thank you, Bill. See you soon.